yeah, for many of us, round 1 wasn't the best for tipping. I went 3 for 8. So if you don't mind me, I think I'm just going to get straight into our round 2 tips. We can forget about that absolute horror show. We kick off round 1 with the battle of 2 Las Vegas losers, but both teams do have high expectations in 2024. So you know that both are going to be desperate for a win. It should be a cracking game between the Broncos and the South Sydney Rabbitohs. I did think the Bunnies showed more in round 1. So if you're going to tip them, I completely understand why, but I am myself going to go for the Brisbane Broncos. I just can't see South Sydney sticking with that forward pack. As good as the outside backs were and as good as Latrell Mitchell looked in round 1, I just don't think that they're going to have enough opportunities compared to the Brisbane Broncos. I think being back at Suncorp will be a huge advantage for the Bronx, and I think getting to play on an actual rugby league field will suit the Broncos. I think they missed out in Vegas the most when it came to that shorter field. They're a team that loves to spread the footy, and quite frankly, I just think they've got more of their best 17 on the park than the South Sydney Rabbitohs do at this point in time. So I think there'll be a lot of pressure on Jason Demetriou if the Rabbitohs can't get the win. And as a close personal friend of mine, I'm sorry JD, but I'm going to have to tip the Broncos. I'm not quite confident to go 13 plus, but I do think they could win by 10 to 12 points. The Cronulla Sharks, they return home to Cronulla as they take on the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and both teams showed a lot of toughness in their round 1 fixtures. Obviously, both came out on different sides of the scoreboard, and the Cronulla Sharks, to me, they look real good. I think they're going to be better than what they have been the last 2 years, so I am going to tip them up against the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. I said it last week, I said it in preseason, so I'm sorry to repeat myself over and over, but until I see changes in this Bulldogs team, I'm just not going to tip them. Unfortunately, I just don't think Cameron Strata, at least for the moment, is getting the best out of the best players at the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs, and I think they need to make substantial changes in the way they're trying to play. And going up against one of the better teams in the competition in round 2, fortunately, Doggies fans, I see you conceding another 13 plus loss. There's little to few guarantees in this lifetime, but for some reason it feels like one of them is that the Parramatta Eels always seem to beat the Penrith Panthers when it doesn't matter. Now when it's finals, that's a different conversation, but when it comes to regular season games, it seems the Parramatta Eels always have the number of the Penrith Panthers, and I always tell myself to stop tipping Penrith. So for once, I'm going to go against my gut and listen to what I've said in the past. I am going to take the Parramatta Eels. The Penrith Panthers, especially in attack, didn't look flash against the Melbourne Storm. We've seen this from Penrith for a few years now, so I do think that this is Parramatta's time to strike. I didn't think that they were at their best against the Bulldogs in round 1, if I'm being honest, but they still managed to get a 13 plus win. And while I don't think it's going to be 13 plus, in fact, when it's Penrith losing, you can always guarantee it's going to be at least close and competitive. But there's something about this game and there's something about this fixture, so I am going to take the Parramatta Eels 1-12 over the Penrith Panthers. I can't remember last time Penrith started 0-2, but even if this does happen, I ain't writing them off. The Canberra Raiders host the West Tigers for the first game in the nation's capital, and the Canberra Raiders were definitely one of the most impressive teams of round 1. They sunk Newcastle Knights to their level, and they absolutely butched them. The West Tigers, we haven't seen them so far in 2024. It's the biggest test of Benji Marshall's career. I don't know what to expect from the Tigers this year, but it seems that we know what to expect from the Raiders. So I'd be a moron, if I'm being honest, not to tip the Canberra Raiders in this fixture, and I'm going to tip him 13 plus. You could make the argument the Cowboys were the best team of round 1 and they're taking on the Newcastle Knights, who you could say were the most disappointing team of round 1. So it's a bit of an important clash for both teams just to see where they actually sit in this early stage of the season. I'm going to go with the North Queensland Cowboys. This one's probably a bit of an easier tip for me than it is going to be for most people, because I do think that the Newcastle Knights will want to respond well, and they do have a 9-day turnaround compared to the Cowboys 6. But after what I saw in round 1, I'm just not convinced on the makeup of that Newcastle Knights side at the moment. So I am going to take the North Queensland Cowboys. Saturday night, the Storm, they're taking on the New Zealand Warriors, the Melbourne Storm. It'll be interesting to see how they can back up from what was one of the best defensive performances I have seen in a long bloody time. But the New Zealand Warriors, they'll be very disappointed, because after that first 25 to 30 minutes, I thought I was seeing a better version of the Warriors in 2023, but they let it slip, which will be very disappointing because it just provided shades of the old school Warriors. But I do think they'll be able to put up a fight. As for me tipping them, I just don't think I can in Melbourne. I think the Melbourne Storm look like they're going to be starting the season on fire. Yes, they only scored 8 points, but they were playing the 3-time defending premiers. and they still managed to keep them to 0. So while I do think the Warriors will offer more in attack than the Penrith Panthers, I still think that the return of Cameron Munster is really going to boost this Melbourne Storm side. I don't see it being a big win. That's why I think this is really a 50-50 game. So I am going to lean just to the Melbourne Storm. Match of the round alert, the Manly Seagulls taking on the Sydney Roosters. Both these teams came home with pockets of chips after Las Vegas. It is at Brookie, the best place in the world. It's a Sunday Arvo at 4 points. It's going to be a fast track. There should be plenty of points in this one, and it's too early in the season for me not to back the boys. So I am going to go with Manly. I think on paper the Sydney Roosters probably do have the stronger team, but I did like what I saw from Manly in round 1. I thought the way Brooks, DC, and Turbo connected was something pretty special, and something a lot of teams that lost in round 1 would be very, very jealous of. So I do think this will be an incredible game. I can't see much splitting the two sides. I do think the Sydney Roosters have the edge in the forward pack, but I do think the Manly Seagulls, if they can provide just enough opportunities, then they've got enough strike power to get the win. So I am going to lean with Manly. I think these are two teams that are definitely going to be there at the end of the year. Two of the most impressive teams from round 1. As long as Manly, with the likes of Jake Javovic, Paseka, and Olakwatu, can match the Roosters for periods in the forwards, then I just think that maybe they've got too much strike for the Sydney Roosters. That being said, if both teams are at their best, it's hard to see the Sydney Roosters letting this one slip. But my tip is Manly. And in the final game, the Dolphins, they're taking on the Dragons. The Dragons, one of the standouts of round 1, while the Dolphins were probably the worst team in round 1. I know a lot of people are going to go with the Dolphins just off reputation, but I really liked what I saw from the Dragons last week. They were playing a very weak Titans side, but the Dolphins just got battered in nearly every single position across the field. I didn't think really anyone played well on the Dolphins, while the Dragons, they're going to be coming in this game with a boatload of confidence. I think the Dolphins should be up better than they were in round 1, considering it is at Redcliffe, but you're playing prime Sunday Arvo round 1 in front of that sort of crowd at Suncorp. If you can't get up for that, I'm not sure how this team's going to go against the Dragons, so I'm shocked the Dragons are outsiders here. I am going to take St. George, and that's going to be an incredible start to St. George. For many people, including me, tipped them to get the wooden spoon. I do think they start 2-0. I don't think they've got quite the class to put 13 plus on the Dolphins. In saying that, they got 13 plus last week, but I just don't think they'll be as good this week. So I'm going to take the Dragons 1-12. So let's hope we can go a bit better than we did in round 1. Hey, I'm taking the Broncos 1-12, the Sharks 13 plus, the Eels 1-12, the Raiders 13 plus, the Cowboys 1-12, the Storm 1-12, Manly 1-12, and the Dragons 1-12. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the comment section, what are your tips for round 2? Smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already, and I'll see you in the next one.